Welcome at this ASW conference. And we have a session with Mark van Baal, who is sitting next to me. And the session is about what Follow does in terms of making sure that firms think long-term, and especially firms in the fossil industry. My name is Jan Bouwens. I'm a professor of accounting at the University of Amsterdam. I'm also involved with accountability and sustainable growth quarterly. And today we have a great interview with Mark van Baal. And Mark, may I invite you to introduce yourself?
Yes, Jan, very welcome in the Follow This offices in Amsterdam. I'm Mark van Baal. I'm the founder of Follow This. We are long-term activist shareholders in the oil and gas industry because we're convinced that we need the oil and gas industry to rapidly change to have any chance to fight the climate crisis. They need to invest heavily in clean energy instead of fossil fuels.
Yes, and let us start there, because we think it's important that firms think long term, because we are in a transition period here, and if I'm right, Follow This has three major arguments to persuade firms to think long term. What are these major arguments?
I'm not sure if we have three. I think we only have two.
Okay.
In the case of the oil and gas industry. Yeah. And the first one applies to the company. If you want to be around as an oil and gas company in 20, 30 years from now, you have to realize you're an energy company and you have to invest in clean energy because there's a disruption going on. Oil and gas will peak in 2029. So you have to look for new business models in clean energy. So that's the argument for the company. And of course, the argument for the world is that these companies are accountable for the bulk of the emissions causing the climate crisis. If they don't stop emitting, then we have no chance to fight the climate crisis. So the two arguments are: it's good for the long-term future of the company, the oil and gas company, and it's good for the long-term future of the planet and the world economy. If climate change gets out of hand, the world economy will shrink, and that's bad for all shareholders.
And is that due to happen if nothing happens?
Yeah, we're very much afraid that if the normal course of history will happen, the normal course of history is that incumbents are too slow to respond to disruptive innovations. The horse and carriage drivers were too slow to respond to the car industry coming up. Kodak was too slow to respond to digital photography, although they invented it themselves, but they didn't want to go to the market. They wanted to hold on, and that's the normal course of history, that incumbents want to hold on to their business model for as long as possible. There will be disruptive companies, there will be disruptive innovations, new technologies, new business models, and they will disrupt them and they will go bankrupt. That happened to Kodak, but it only took 32 years. And in this case, we cannot afford to let this company slowly go bankrupt, because it will take 30 years and they will go bankrupt in a 3-4 degrees world, a world with devastating climate change. So therefore, we need to convince them to change course.
But we return to the business model, right? So why aren't the firms not able to think themselves of that transition? Why do they need to be persuaded, actually?
Yeah, that's something I've been breaking my head over for the last 20 years, first as a journalist, then as an activist shareholder. How on earth do the CEOs of oil and gas companies don't see what we all see, that they need to change to survive? And my only explanation is these are people, old people, they're our age, even older. They've invested their entire career in oil and gas. They've been very successful. Now they finally reached the boardrooms, and they can't even think outside the box. So they want to stay in their comfort zone. They want to continue doing what they're good at. That's turning hydrocarbons into petrodollars, and they don't even want to think about something new. And that's fully understandable. So therefore, we need the shareholders to compel them, and if needed, force them to change. Because I've talked to enough CEOs of oil majors now, they're not going to do it on their own accord. No way.
No. Now, when we think about the shareholders and we think who is holding these firms, right? Many of these firms, and also Shell, the shares are actually held by institutional stockholders or big stockholders. And remember that there's been numbers of 70%, right, are held by institutional stockholders.
Yeah.
So how does this number affect the effort allocation of Follow This? So how much effort do you actually stick into persuading shareholders, and then particularly these institutional
since they have the majority, 60, 70%, and only 30% is retail shareholders. We need to convince them. But the good news is they have an enormous incentive to stop the climate crisis because they're invested in the entire global economy. A typical institutional investor, if it's a pension fund or an asset manager, their portfolio is in every business in society, in every corner of the world. So they grow with the world economy. So they're stewards of the global economy. They're universal owners, as they sometimes say. So the money they've been trusted with from our savings, our pensions, grow with approximately the same speed as the global economy. So they have an enormous incentive to be stewards of the global economy, and they can only do so by stopping the climate crisis. There's no doubt among scientists and economists that if climate change gets out of hand, if we go beyond the 2 degrees C, there will be enormous economical disasters, parts of the world where there will be floods, wildfires, extreme weather, harvests which will be wasted, parts of the world will be unlivable. So there's enormous incentive for institutional investors to stop the climate crisis, and they're all saying that. And therefore we thought, let's just put a fair ask on the agenda of the shareholder meeting. Please, oil major, align yourself with the Paris Climate Agreement. We need you. You have the engineering prowess. You have the global political power. You have the brains and the billions. So if you speed up the energy transition, we will be able to stop the climate crisis, and that's in the benefit of the large shareholders. But it's a fair ask. But still, we're at 20% now.
Yep. And some of the shareholders say, well, we can not change this climate crisis to happen. We just make ourselves resilient to that. How do you address that argument?
That's what some investors say, but they say, the climate crisis needs to be priced in the economy. And then I say to them, it's priced in your portfolio because you're also in agriculture, you're also in real estate, in areas which will be flooded. So it's priced in. So it's your obligation to act on climate. You cannot separate yourself from this crisis.
And then how do you talk to the shareholders? So you have, of course, the big shareholder meeting, but also, do you also actually reach out to institutional investors themselves? So
of course, because we go to the shareholder meetings, you have these all major CEOs, and there, when we have a resolution on the agenda, we're allowed to speak for 5 to 10 minutes. And of course, we try to convince shareholders to vote for it, but then all the institutional investors already have voted electronically before the AGM. So the work is before the AGM, via the media and also in direct talks to convince them that they need to vote for change, because if they don't, their entire portfolio is at risk.
So the pushback has been tremendous also from management, right? And how is it possible actually that management can actually limit the extent to which you can influence the shareholders? How is that possible? How is that work?
That's also the million or even the $1 billion question. We have a very fair ask. We ask the oil majors to slowly shift their investments and their business from fossil fuels to clean energy. Slowly reduce their emissions, so the world is able to meet the Paris Climate Agreement, and we can limit global warming till well below 2 degrees, and we can avoid the biggest disaster. So it's a very fair ask. It's good for the company. Company doesn't want to do it, but it's good for the shareholders. Still, they don't use the power of the vote. Before we started filing these resolutions, they didn't use the power of the vote at all. They said, we have engagement. We talk with the oil majors every year. We have a cup of coffees with the CEOs, and we slowly steer them in the right direction. And as it always goes with confidential conversations, both parties have a completely different interpretation.
Yeah.
So when I talk to an oil major, they say, yeah, we talk to our investors and they're perfectly fine with our strategy. When I talk to investors, say, we talk to the oil major and we tell them to change their strategy. But because it's confidential, it's not transparent. Everybody can have their own story about this engagement conversations, which is a very strange thing, actually, that you talk to an investor as an listed company, because you're not allowed to share any information which is not public. So what do you talk about? You can only hear what they expect from you, but you cannot give a response. So it's very secretive. But yeah, lots of people have a nice job talking to these people. So I sometimes got the feeling in the beginning of Follow This that they were thinking, oh, Follow This is they're influencing my comfortable life. Now suddenly I have to say what I vote. And they all said voting is escalation. That's also a very strange thing in the investor community. They do engagements and it's important to have a good relationship, they always say. But voting, that's escalation. That's the only democracy where voting is considered escalation. We slowly convinced a part of the investors who vote. Normally 99.9% votes with management. Now we have 20% of the voters behind us. So that's quite a strong signal. Because there's another 60% who says, we agree with you, but we don't vote because we prefer the engagement. So it's a very strong signal. That's what Shell, BP, Equinor, even Chevron acted upon. When we got votes for our resolutions, they set targets for all their emissions, something they absolutely didn't want to do. But still, they all say we will be net zero by 2050, except for Exxon. But still, they don't have to go. They don't have to be fully aligned with Paris because their shareholders don't vote for it yet.
So the decisions that are being made are de facto hardly made on the shareholder meetings, right? Because they already have.
They have been made before the shareholder meeting. Now most investors vote latest on the Friday before the shareholder meeting, and that's where our work has to be done.
So thinking of transition, I mean that really requires that you convince management and shareholders to really think long term and a long term horizon, which actually puts quite some challenge on their imagination. And can they really think how a world would look like where fossil energy is no longer there?
So they can't.
So what's your approach here to actually convince them?
Of course, we have our talks with the CEOs and the boards of the oil majors.
Yeah.
And to be honest, these are most of the time tiring conversations because I go in there and think, okay, I can finally meet the CEO, so maybe I can give him some inspiration. How great! Yeah. I'm an engineer, so I love technology, and I tell them about the new technology. Solar panels, wind turbines, which are getting cheaper by the day, and getting oil and gas out of the ground is getting more expensive, and they will have to pay for the consequences of climate change.
But they also have the benefits.
So they still have the benefits, but also warn them that as in 2029, demand will go down. It will be the first time in the 150 years history of the oil and gas industry, of the oil industry and the gas industry, that they have to operate in a declining market. So prices will go down. But that's all to put effort.
Are they so that doesn't work. Convinced? Are they convinced that if you say that, well, demand will go down?
Of course, they of course, eventually clean energy will take over. But they think this will be after their tenure, and most of the time after their life.
Yeah.
So the promises for net zero by 2050 are also completely empty. So we need to have that conversations, of course, but that's not going to change the world. The change has to be with the investors. So that's where we put most of our efforts in, to convince institutional investors. For example, Norges, the sovereign wealth fund of Norway, they say all the time that they want to stop the climate crisis, and still they vote against emission reductions at the big oil companies.
Right.
So they still support Shell, BP, Chevron, Exxon to continue with increasing emissions and not decreasing them. We need to halve them by the next 10 years. So that's where our work is. And I think if we can convince them that it's more uncomfortable to vote against these resolutions than it is as they do now, then we're there. But that's apparently, also these people have to serve. So like the old major CEOs, they can't get out of their comfort zone. And also the leadership of the large institutional investors, they also have a comfort zone, which is having their coffees, having their nice conversations, not being confrontational. And they also have to get out of the comfort zone and be confrontational with companies who can really make a difference.
Yep. So at one point, Shell was investing a lot in transition, and they pulled back on that.
Yeah.
But would it be a strategy for this to say, well, we're going to focus really on one on one fossil firm, and if we can convince them, the other will have to follow.
But that's exactly our theory of change.
Yes.
That we believe that if one oil major will change course,
right,
and then realize we're an energy company, starts investing heavily in clean energy, making the transition, I think customers will reward it. Finally, you can get your petrol from an oil major where you know the profits are invested in the business of the future in clean energy. Society will reward it, governments, shareholders will reward it. So then if one oil major shows that it's possible, then the others will follow. Like in the car industry, the entire car industry said it's impossible to build electric cars. One company didn't know that, did it, and now everybody's following. That took a long time. We can't afford that time this time. So if one of them changes course, then the others will follow. But we have to bet on different horses because focusing on only Shell, then I get accused by Shell all the time that why only us? We're the best boy in class. And I would say, that's why we address you.
We want you to become even better.
We want to become even better. But we need to address more than one. But at the end of the day, if one or two show that it's possible, and I think that's a mindset, then the others will follow.
Right. And do you also find support in other industries like the automobile industry? Are they also supportive of?
No, they're also businesses. They're also on the stock exchange, so they also don't like shareholder activism. So that's difficult to get their support. We get their support when they ask for clean energy.
Yep.
So Maersk, for example, the big shipping line, they are very public about the fact we want to run our ships on sustainable fuels, but you're not supplying them. You need to supply them. So that helps a lot. So.
Yeah.
Strong ask from the demand side, but at the end of the day, the supply side decides what we use.
Yeah, of course we come from an academic background, so I do have a question. So how can academia actually help you? Both from a science point of view as well as from maybe an accountancy or finance point of view. How can research help you?
Research can help us, or academics can help us by making the most important thing is, I think, making the general public aware that there's no choice between profits and climate. That's the fallacy the industry is putting in society. Yeah, we have to do something about the climate, but not too fast because we need the profits and not me. But I think science needs to speak to the public and explain the climate crisis hitting the global economy and therefore hitting your wealth.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that will make a change. Yeah. So that's one thing they can do. And of course, they can all be a member of Follow This, a green shareholder. So we are with a few thousand, as we call green shareholders. So for 30 euros a year, you can also become a green shareholder. We go to the shareholder meetings on your behalf. It would be also nice if we can be on the shareholder meeting and say, we're also talking on behalf of a few hundred scientists who also believe that oil major can change the world.
Okay, so there's lots to do still. I would like to thank you very much for this interview and for all the insights that you give. I think that there's many more questions, but people still have the opportunity to ask these questions, and we guess you're happy to answer those. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thanks a lot, Jan, for the questions.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. All right.